So the idea that people like Helen Joyce or J.K. Rowling or whoever else in the so-called gender-critical TERF movement, all the women involved with it, would be safe if the oppressions against trans people were allowed to be solidified, which is what they want. They would be safe from the fascists, the right-wingers, the conservatives. It's ludicrous. Because they are literally already currently using the precedents that oppress queer people against women as well. But that's what people like Helen Joyce think. They think that they'll be safe because they can currently pal around with people like Matt Walsh because at least they have the shared enemy of trans people. It's foolish. Matt Walsh literally thinks that women should be second-class citizens, that they shouldn't be allowed to vote, that they should have no control over their own bodily autonomy. And that's what they want for all of these women. No matter how much they fight in tandem against trans people, eventually, once those oppressions are solidified against the queer people, they're gonna start coming for the rights of women again. They already are. You know, conservatives are often up to a lot of wacky stuff, and, you know, when they're not passing laws in Missouri to allow teachers to spank children so long as the parents say it's okay, and also all of their states that are Republican run allow this as well, by and large. You know, the abuse of children, not really a good thing. And when they're not, you know, flying human beings to Martha's Vineyard on the taxpayer's dime while half of Florida's children live in poverty as a political stunt and then getting sued after the fact for it, like Ron DeSantis, when they're not doing all this, well, they're taking progress flags and cutting off elements of it to just keep the rainbow. So we've got Helen Joyce, known genocide of trans people advocate, who is apparently, allegedly, a straight woman. You know, that's strike number 1 already. Pictured here in the one of the TERF gatherings, the gender critical gatherings, where they've defaced the progress flag by just cutting it off at the rainbow. Now, what's interesting about this is that the progress flag, you know, if it really is just trans people that the gender criticals don't like and are, you know, worried about or whatever, they could have cut it off. If you could see by the design of the flag, they could have cut it off at the trans part, right? Now, you do lose the intersex part, but they're not really the biggest fans of intersex people either, because intersex people kind of blow a hole in their whole, you know, biological essentialist view of gender. The anti-scientific and anti-medical consensus view of gender and sex. They think it's the same thing, but it's not. They could have cut it off at just the trans part, but they decided to start the cutting at the black and brown part. So for those of you who don't know, this progress flag, well, you know, some will say the design is a bit messy and the rainbow covers every spectrum of color because it's literally a rainbow. I do still find that this flag is fine. It's whatever, I don't care. Like, you can have the one without the all this, you can have the one with the all that. It's up to you. I seem to see both in the same lens. I see that, you know, all of these colors over here are included within the main rainbow. They chose to start cutting at the black and brown part. The black and brown used to represent black and brown people who are in the LGBTQ community, because those people in those communities within the LGBTQ community usually see most of the oppression and have the hardest time dealing with those because of the intersections of their oppression, them having to face racism, as well as the homophobia, transphobia, etc., etc., etc. They decided to start cutting at the black and brown. And it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder why they would decide to do that. So I did say that Helen Joyce was pro, genocide of trans people, and that's actually very true. So we've actually gone over this in previous videos. We've got Helen Joyce here, who is the Pope of the TERFs. Well, actually, no, that's J.K. Rowling. She's the Archbishop of the TERFs, or something like that, surely. Who has, all the way back in June, decided to come out, essentially for the elimination of trans people, but not in those exact words. You got to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. So let's, take a listen. Refresh our memory.
I think that for quite a while now, this has not been about...
content warning. They're a Brit bonger as well. Content warning. You got a license for that transphobia, yeah? God save the Queen, and all that.
That was important 2 or 3 years ago when there weren't enough people, but there have been enough people to be critical mass, to be funding the crowdfunders, to be writing letters to MPs, all that sort of thing, to have a movement, to have support for women and men, of course. I mean, there's people like Graham, of course, as well, who've got their...
There's Graham, meaning Graham Linehan, who literally got divorced and turned his entire family inside out because of his transphobic views, literally ruining his own life for the fact that he finds trans people to be icky or something. There's really no good justification that we've gotten from that guy. Also, the man looks like a fucking mess. He's look-shaming trans people all the time. I think it's fair game to mention that he looks like a melted wax candle. Anyway.
We can't win this by saying, there's 60x million people in this country and we've got to persuade all of them or a great majority of them. We've got to get through to the decision makers. And in the meantime, while we're trying to get through to the decision makers, we have to try to limit the harm.
So she's saying here that because gender critical TERF views, quote unquote, just, conservative transphobia with a small, patina of feminism allegedly on top of it. They're saying that because their ideas are not popular enough to resonate with the broader public because, being accepting of trans people is slowly but surely building more and more in the public consciousness as the thing to do, to be accepting of trans people, allow them to live their lives, be respectful of their name and pronouns. Because they know that they can't get through to the broader public, they want to capture the institutions, the power centers, and force their will, their transphobic views, their anti-trans views, into the broader, society, in this case, the UK, bruv, and essentially make it so that trans people are not allowed to live dignified lives like everybody else. That's the goal. They don't want trans people to exist, and she goes on to talk about how they're going to limit harm in this regard.
And that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. And that's for two reasons.
Reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. Some would ask, CONURE, are you a little bit too flippant with the word genocide? That word has a meaning, can you really say, yes, it is actually. If you're going to try to reduce and keep down the number of trans people that there are by trying to limit their access to healthcare, limit their access to public services like restrooms, limit their access to being able to go to school without fear of any kind of retribution for their own identity, forcibly medically detransition them through limiting their healthcare, that's trying to move people from one group, the trans group, to another group, the cis group, in this case, the one that they want them to be. They want to force people to be cis. If you were to do that with somebody of one religion and move them to another, there's a word for that. Happened before in human history.
One of them is that every one of those people is a person who's been damaged. But the second one is every one of those...
Says the absolute pinnacle of, non-damaged, fully functioning, non-problematic, no issues whatsoever poster child here. Says you. What the fuck? Has been damaged. So they're saying that, being trans is a mental illness, gender dysphoria or whatever, it's a mental illness, blah, 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 blah. It's an illness to be cured, transness is, and we can convert them, they're saying. They're trying to, reduce the amount of people that transition, try to keep them cis,
Basically, a huge problem to a sane world. Like, if you've got people that, and whether they're transitioned, whether they're happily transitioned, whether they're unhappily transitioned, whether they're...
So she's making it clear that she doesn't care if, you being trans, you're happy in that way. So it's not like, oh my God, there's these people who are trans and they suffer so much from gender dysphoria. We got to help these people. It's also, the people who aren't suffering, who are also trans, who have gotten the care, who are living their lives like everybody else, vibing. Those people can get can get it too.
If you've got people who've dissociated from their sex in some way, every one of those people is someone who needs special accommodation in a sane world where we re-acknowledge the truth of sex. And I mean,
the truth of sex, which disagrees with the medical and scientific consensus on the issue. Of course, Helen Joyce, Archbishop of the transphobes, knows better than the actual medical experts who study this for a living.
People who've been damaged by it, the children who've been put through this, those people deserve every accommodation we can possibly make, but every one of them is a difficulty.
Yes.
And I mean, I know that sounds heartless. I'm trying to say exactly the opposite of sounding heartless. I'm saying every one of those people for 50, 60, 70 years is going to need things that the rest of us just don't need because the rest of us are just our sex.
So she's saying that every single trans person for the rest of their life or being trans are going to need special accommodation. In this case, trans healthcare, hormones, any kind of surgical procedures, therapies, blah, blah, blah. All of those things are necessary in the umbrella of trans healthcare for trans people to be able to live their lives as actualized, full human beings that they are. And, that's a problem for Helen Joyce. Some may say that any kinds of comparisons to authoritarian regimes of the past who have also made similar points, some would say you're a bit overreacting when you talk about that. But I don't think that's actually true. What about people who are paraplegic? What about people who have learning disabilities? What about people who are blind? All of these people with these disabilities, all of these people require special accommodations for the rest of their lives, for the 40, 50, 60, 70 plus years that they're going to be on this planet and in these countries that they're in. Should we be trying to reduce the number of those people as well? In my view, we should be trying to give anybody who suffers any kind of ailment the help that they need. I am in favor of nationalizing the health insurance industry in my country, the United States, and making it so that we have a single payer system where you get care, taxpayers pay for it, aka you also pay for it through your tax dollars. We also make accommodations in our public lives in terms of, ramps for people with wheelchairs, et cetera, et cetera. All these kinds of things help with people who have difficulties with sight to be able to live their lives to the fullest extent possible. And it will cost money, it will cost time, it will cost labor to do that. But I think that is worth the cost because we want to provide the best possible life for every single person in the country, no matter what disability they've got. And this is not to say that, being trans is a disability, though it is certainly true that trans healthcare is a bit more involved, but I think that is worthwhile to allow people to have. Helen Joyce doesn't seem to think so. Helen Joyce seems to think that reducing the amount of people who are trans is better in the long run because allowing for people to get the healthcare they need in the healthcare system who are trans is too much money or something. I don't know. It's a long-winded way of saying that she finds trans people icky and she doesn't want to see them or hear about them. So she wants to reduce the amount of them that there are and essentially through any means necessary. It makes you wonder. Every life is worth saving. Why isn't this argument brought up for cancer patients? It's a good question. So it is true, the Nazis brought up talking points like Helen Joyce is talking about right now. One of the so-called justifications, quote-unquote, that the Nazi regime in Germany gave for killing disabled people was that they costed the country money in order to allow for them to have, full actualized lives, these disabled people. That was one of the reasons why they were also systematically killed during the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. It's the same thing.
So the fewer of those people there are, the better in the sane world that I hope we will reach.
So when we see pictures like this, where that same person we just saw is holding a progress flag where they've started the cutting at the black and brown stripes of the progress flag rather than just the trans parts that they seem to have the major problem with, it leads me to believe that they're actually not big fans of black and brown people either. I don't think that's really too much of a hop, skip, and a jump. If you want some further justification, Kiwi Farms, who you've probably heard about if you're watching my channel, but if you don't know, this is a stalking harassment website that has led to the suicides of people. The people on Kiwi Farms would utilize dox personal information that people would have to harass a variety of people, usually LGBTQ plus people, and try to get them to commit suicide. It's the ultimate goal, to ruin their lives and the lives of their family members and friends to the point where they kill themselves. That's literally what, the goal was for a lot of these people on the site. Joshua Moon, the owner of that website who is currently in tatters and falling apart because of the Drop Kiwi Farms campaign that was led by Keffels, who were successful in that, he issued a statement apparently rallying, quote, gender-critical communities, Helen Joyce's communities, to support his website, which has for years served as a rallying point for doxing, harassment, and incitement to suicide, as well as hosting terrorist murder manifestos. There have been years of gender-critical activists revealing that they use the forum, where anti-Semitism, racism, transphobia, homophobia, and sexism run rampant, a handful of them in their own names, some calling Kiwi Farms to act as a digital warfare unit on behalf of the gender-critical movement. Following this, Erin Reed, Erin in the Morn, go follow on Twitter. I will always say this every time I bring up her tweets because she chronicles a lot of this stuff, is always on the ball. Tweet, surprise, surprise, the main site for, quote, gender-critical people over it is publicly praising Kiwi Farms, an ultra-right, white supremacist Nazi site where racial epithets flow and trans people get doxxed and harassed. The top comments all show how many gender-critical people use Kiwi Farms. This is from August 26, 2022. So I'll link to these tweets and everything in the description, as we always do. You can read through all of this if you want, but we'll see this tweet, or this upload, this post, from over it, Quote, that site definitely has its problems, Kiwi Farms, and it does itself no favors by being so aggressively anti-politeness, because the optics, is the problem with Kiwi Farms. They're a little bit rude, right? But it's still unsettling to see that it can be knocked off the web completely by TRAs, which is, essentially a derogatory term for trans people that they use. The news media coverage is especially creepy. There's no attempt to be balanced or question the TRA's narrative about Kiwi Farms. Kind of reminds me of the news coverage of the super straight, super gay, super lesbian movement, quote unquote, last year, where journalists categorically condemned it as an alt-right hate movement originated by Nazis, because it was. But these people don't see it that way, apparently. That couldn't have been further from the truth, citation needed, but it's the only description that people who didn't see it for themselves now have. The trans lobby has got to be one of the most powerful lobbies in existence right now, somehow, even though the humanity of trans people is being weaponized to win right-wingers elections and also fundraise and, get money out the wazoo for people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro. Totally nothing to look at there, right? TRA means trans rights activist? Oh shit, wait, I'm thinking of something else then. TRA means trans rights activists, apparently. Though, the way that they say it, it might as well be a derogatory term. I was thinking of another term that they use. Probably like AGP or something. Some other acronyms that they use. Because they can't just say what they want to say. So we got another post. Quote, honestly, I love Kiwi Farms. I've learned so many interesting things I would never have known about otherwise, just because so many different kinds of people are there. Also, some of them are crazily good documentarians. Bonus, very funny shit. To whom? So they say, quote, they drove no one to suicide. They don't harass people. They do not contact them. Are you insane? That's what the site is literally known for. Even before the Drop Kiwi Farms campaign, that is what the site was known for. I think it's one of the last free places on the internet, and I hope it lives forever, to be honest. It would be a huge loss for the site to disappear. I think something else would sprout up in its stead, but probably wouldn't be as big or have as many users. So it's been known that a lot of gender-critical people utilize Kiwi Farms, use the docs and information on the website in order to further their campaigns against trans people having basic human rights. So Jesse Gender put out a really, really good video that we will link to in the description that you should definitely go watch. Maybe after this one, because this one's 2 hours long, where this video will hopefully only be like an hour. The Anti-Trans Disinformation Pipeline. It's really good. It came out just a couple days ago. I've watched it. Shouts out Jesse Gender. You can see here that Anna Slats, one of the writers for the Redux or whatever, which is a gender-critical TERF website, has apparently very actively used Kiwi Farms in the past. Not very good, right? One of the major players in the scene. We've talked about in the past in this video how transphobia melts your brain, how there is very, very deep roots in transphobia to anti-Semitism, racism, and you can learn more about that in that video. I think this video is very good for that, in my opinion. I think it did a fairly good job. We'll toot my own horn on that. So it's not necessarily shocking that the people that are trafficking in this transphobia, as much as they are and as deep in it as they are, would actually be very upset about Kiwi Farms going down and also getting the information that they use, that they weaponize against trans people from that website when Kiwi Farms is literally full of, or was, I guess, Rip Bozo. Rest in peace, you won't be missed. Literally full of racists, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, white nationalists, etc., etc. So it's not really shocking that we'd start the cutting at the black and brown stripes rather than the trans stripes. It's not shocking to me that some of the most excited proponents of the anti-trans movement happen to be neo-Nazis, or at least in the periphery of them. So Alejandro Caraballo on Twitter posted, the Texas Republican Party promoted a Texas drag event on Twitter to get people to protest it and shut it down. This is who showed up. Is anyone actually surprised? So let's see. Texas GOP alert! All ages drag show coming up in Pflugerville this weekend. Not only will children be exposed to overtly sexual activities, but the event is advertised with alcohol sales. Because, children are never in the presence of alcohol. Don't mention sports events. Don't mention NASCAR. Don't mention a wide variety of events that children are present at that alcohol is also present at. Also, citation needed on the sexual activities. To these people, simply dressing in drag is inherently sexual when it definitely is not. When you look at the all-ages drag events, some of these people are wearing more clothes than your average conservative, female politician. And look who shows up. Would you look at that? Oh, it's just Nazis. It's just Nazis. They've got a sign that says, quote, transvestite, which is old hat by this point. Come on, you got to update your lingo. You're living in the 1930s here. Transvestite is not a gender, it is a mental disorder. Okay, dude. Says the literal Nazis. Listen, if there's any argument to be made about what's a mental illness and what's not, bigotry is definitely up there. Jesus Christ. Transphobia, bigotry in general, racism. There's a better argument to be made that is a mental disorder than being trans would be. This also happened before when it came to, was it CPAC? It was some other conservative event. I don't know, but somebody in chat will know. It was some other conservative event where there were literal Nazis who showed up to that as well. It might have been CPUSA, but they weren't allowed in because they're literal Nazis. You know, you got to be a little bit more covert in your neo-Nazi sympathies to be able to get into these events. Completely unsurprising. Also, the Pope of the transphobes, J.K. Rowling, goes on to, you know, in the past, got a little hot water on the internet for praising Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary, which Jesse Gender also has a really good video going over, and there's a second part coming out to it soon, TM. Quote, and your film did a good job exposing the incoherence of gender identity theory and some of its harms done. Many institutions I used to admire have uncritically embraced this dogma, but I reserve my ire for them rather than shouting coward at individual. So they got into a little bit of a spat, a little bit of a tussle on the timeline. But J.K. Rowling apparently thinks that the What is a Woman documentary, which literally just lied people into documentaries and then selectively edited those interviews with pro-trans people to make them look silly, foolish, etc., it was not even close to being called a documentary. It is essentially just, you know, a propagandistic piece of garbage. But apparently J.K. Rowling enjoyed it and thought it was very good. Even though she's upset with Matt Walsh, you know, calling women cowards or something, because Matt Walsh doesn't think that women should be first-class citizens. He thinks that they should be second-class citizens. But anyway. So what's super interesting about this is I've actually talked about this a lot in the past, not only in just videos like this, but also the right-wing civil rights ladder dilemma. How the right wing consistently uses the oppression of marginalized groups against each other in order to further the oppression of other groups that are not currently being targeted, at least not as overtly, right? We've seen it recently in the overturn of Roe v. Wade. That precedent, the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the right to privacy, is now being weaponized against the Supreme Court cases allowing for gay marriage and making anti-sodomy laws illegal. They want to, you know, reverse those decisions. That's born out of that as well. The intersectional bigotry of right-wingers is very important to recognize. So currently, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, conservatives generally on the right wing are utilizing the oppression of trans people to gain power, to fundraise, and eventually enact their agenda, right? People like Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh use it to make money and gain power through influence. Politicians use it to get elected, like DeSantis and Abbott, right? They're using the humanity of trans people to do that. They're also going to use that power, once they've gotten it, to attack gay people. They're also going to use it to attack women and anybody who can give birth because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. They'll be skipping steps. So what the latter is trying to, this analogy is trying to show you is that each of these rungs are necessary for the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, etc., to achieve the patriarchal white supremacist state that they used to have, that this country was literally founded as. They want to return to tradition, as it were. Through the civil rights fights of the past, the civil rights movement for the emancipation of black people from slavery, as well as the ending of segregation, through the civil rights movements for women's suffrage, through the civil rights movements, through the civil rights fights for gay marriage and equality for queer people, we've actually been able to break a lot of these rungs that they previously had, and we've drifted very far from this patriarchal white supremacist state in the actual letter of the law. Not necessarily in the effects, because all of these groups still suffer, and, you know, white men are unfortunately still held, you know, on a higher plane because of a variety of systemic oppressions. But we've actually been able to break a lot of these rungs. Now, it's not to say that the rungs are gone. It's not like the entire ladder's been destroyed, because it hasn't. Because they can very easily overturn Roe v. Wade and start repairing this ladder, right? And obviously, a lot of these are interchangeable as well. They can skip steps and whatever. The basic idea is if they're allowed to solidify their grasp on the trans rung, they will then go on to attack gay people, meaning that gay people are not safe just because currently the right-wingers are focusing on trans people. Eventually, with this new hold that they have on the trans ladder rung, they will start repairing the gay ladder rung. So now cis women will also be under attack through things like the overturn of Roe v. Wade. If they had instead gone after gay marriage through the right to privacy, they could have used the similar precedent to undo Roe v. Wade, and you could have switched the positions of these, right? So if they solidify that rung, they move on to the next one, then on to the next one, then on to the next one, and eventually they get back here. That is the trajectory of the fascist, of the white supremacists, to get to that patriarchal white supremacist state that they want. So the idea that people like Helen Joyce or J.K. Rowling or whoever else in the so-called gender-critical TERF movement, all the women involved with it, but also the men too, but mostly the women here, would be safe If the oppressions against trans people were allowed to be solidified, which is what they want, they would be safe from the fascists, the right-wingers, the conservatives. The idea that they would be is ridiculous. It's ludicrous. Because they are literally already currently using the precedents that oppress queer people against women as well. But that's what people like Helen Joyce think. They think that they'll be safe because they can currently pal around with people like Matt Walsh, with literal neo-Nazis on places like kiwi farms, because at least they have the shared enemy of trans people. And in this case, you know, queer people generally, because a lot of these people are also homophobic, though they pretend not to be. It's foolish. Matt Walsh literally thinks that women should be second-class citizens, that they shouldn't be allowed to vote, that they should have no control over their own bodily autonomy. The broader conservative movement, especially in the United States, and we know how impactful things happening in the United States can be to the world over, because a lot of the fucking bullshit right-wing garbage that is really popular in the States ends up infecting places like the UK as well. The goal of conservatism is to return to tradition, to the time where women were the property of their husbands and fathers, where they couldn't vote. They couldn't participate in broader society. They just had to stay home as baby incubators, barefoot and pregnant. And that's what they want for all of these women. No matter how much they fight in tandem against trans people, eventually, once those oppressions are solidified against the queer people, they're going to start coming for the rights of women again. They already are. The idea that you're going to be safe just because you're palling around with them is completely foolish and ahistorical. But that's what they think. Gender-critical people, quote-unquote, utilize their identities as women through identity politics as a shield, and their so-called feminism as a shield, to deflect criticism for the fact that they are transphobic pieces of shit. And they think it'll save them in the long run, but it definitely will not. Speaking of absolute reprehensible garbage and sussy-wussy people who also don't think that women should be on the same playing field as men, Tucker Carlson apparently is calling openly for violence against teachers and LGBTQ plus people. So let's look at this clip. There's some wacky stuff going on here as well, you know, as we'll see in this follow-up clip as well. Well, let's see what's going on with old Tucker Carlson. Old, constantly constipated Tucker Carlson, inheritor of frozen dinner estate, failing upwards his entire life, now most popular news show on the goddamn television in the States.
These are sex crimes, and the people committing them should be punished. Now,
what are sex crimes? We're assuming allowing people to transition and allowing kids to go through the medical process that is extensive and multiple years long of eventually being prescribed puberty blockers, then eventually going on HRT or getting off the puberty blockers if they understand that they're not cis, or if they are trans, they go on for blah, but we've gone over this before. We assume that's what they're talking about here.
Try and say that out loud anywhere but on Fox News. You can't. Why can't you? Because it's true.
No, because you're fucking stupid. You're counter to the medical and scientific consensus on the matter. The only reason you don't like it is, one, you understand it's good for ratings to talk about this shit. Two, you find them icky or whatever, which you probably got some fucking shit going on in your own mind about all that. And three, you're fucking stupid. That's literally it.
That's why.
You
can't say the true things. You can claim the earth is flat and no one gets exercise. But when you start saying things like...
Yeah, they do. The fuck? Bro, flat earthers are a hop, skip, and a jump away from anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists as well. Those things are very close. Contrary to popular belief, the flat earth theorists have a lot of overlap with anti-Semites, with white supremacists and neo-Nazis. Let a flat earther talk for any amount of time, and it'll eventually come up.
Like, all lives matter, or sexualizing my children is a crime, and if you keep it up, I'm going to hurt you because I'm the...
Yeah, but nobody's doing that. So that, thank God for you. The only people that are sexualizing kids are the ones that are okay with child beauty pageants, which conservatives overwhelmingly are. These conservative states, like with the honey boo boo shit, it's fucking weird as hell. The people that are in favor of arranged marriages, which a lot of conservatives are, the people that do purity balls, the overwhelming majority of child sexual abusers that happen to be conservative, Christian, religious people, the fact that the average child abuser is a religious Christian white man in a middle-class household, don't look at those people, all right? Don't look at the fact that the grand majority of states that allow for child marriage happen to be run by Republicans and overwhelmingly vote Republican. Don't look at any of that, that sexualization of children. That's pay no mind to the man behind the curtain.
Libs of TikTok is being banned from the internet. Why? Because it showed documentary evidence of what was happening. Some people describe what was happening as grooming. We're not exactly sure what that means, but if it's sexually abusing children...
We're not exactly sure what that means because People like you, Tucker Carlson, people like Libs at TikTok, Shire Chick, have completely destroyed the actual meaning of the term grooming to the point where people who are like anti-child abuse groups have told right-wingers to shut the fuck up on the right about using the term grooming because they're using it wrong, and actually making it harder for those anti-child abuse groups to actually do their work and protect children. You know, people like that. That's why people we don't know exactly what that means. You're looking at why.
But the term groomer is now hate speech, says NBC News.
Yeah, because nobody fucking uses it correctly. Nobody on the right is using it correctly.
A couple of months ago, these people, one is Libs of TikTok, another is Matt Walsh, you have Chris Rufo, who you just mentioned. They've been villainizing and literally demonizing these doctors who treat these people for months now. And so in that time, you can just see it in their mentions. This sicko language, I've seen it a million times over, because every time they tweet about these doctors, using these doctors' faces sometimes, and all of the comments are like sickos, demonic, satanic, pedophile, groomer.
Yeah, they're being mean to doctors who castrate children, who cut the breasts off girls.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. We've gone through this a million times. It literally just doesn't happen. It doesn't. Next question. You know, move on from that talking point. Where's the evidence? You'll never see it. You'll never find it because they don't want you to see it because it doesn't exist. They want to make you believe that it does, but they can't actually show you. They'll believe the evidence of your ears and eyes. They don't want you to actually look into this any further. They want you to take their word at face value because they are knowing liars. They know they are lying. A lot of these people like Tucker Carlson, you got to know. He's at Fox News. They got a whole team there that could look these things up and actually find the actual facts of the matter. They choose not to. Or if they even do, they choose to ignore it and go on to continue lying because it's good for their ratings. It's good for attaining power. It's good for achieving the white supremacist patriarchal state that Tucker Carlson constantly talks about wanting on his program. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's the logical extension of what he believes. And it's not just mean words either. They have literally been receiving death threats. Boston Children's Hospital. There was actually a bomb threat that was called at Boston Children's Hospital, which we've covered in previous videos. Apparently, a woman was arrested by the FBI for calling in those bomb threats. So it's not just mean words. They've kind of moved the goalposts a little bit. Before, they would talk about how all Lips of TikTok does is they repost videos of, you know, these lefties' own words, and that's it. Not to mention that all of the captions are riddled with lies and violent language. It used to be that. Well, no, now they're just being mean to doctors. You know, the people who are fans of Libs of TikTok, they're just being mean to doctors. They're not doing anything. Come on. You are not as dumb as people like Tucker Carlson think you are.
This is not only happening, it is being celebrated and aggressively defended by virtually everyone with power. Take 3 steps back. We used to say, oh, our society doesn't care about children. That's not what this is. What you're seeing is a society that hates children. You would have to hate children
to allow for corporal punishment in the majority of right-wing Republican-run states, aka the spanking of children, the child abuse that these states allow teachers to do in these conservative states. Oh, but with the parents' consent, of course. You'd have to look at the overwhelming majority of states that are Republican-run conservative states that still allow for child marriage. But that would be inconvenient to the narrative, you see. You can't really bring that stuff up because then the entire narrative of people like Tucker Carlson completely disintegrates. And you see him for the actual knowing liar that he is.
In order to sexualize them. Because sexualizing children screws them up for life. Ask anyone to whom it's happened. Period. No one should put up with this. No parent should put up with this for 1 second, no matter what the law says. Your duty, your moral duty, is to defend your children. This is an attack on your children, and you should fight back.
So they're saying it's an attack on your children to follow the standards of care as it pertains to trans health care. That is apparently an attack on your children, and you have to do something about it. Whatever that do something about is, you know, we'll not really know because he can't outright say what he thinks people should do. He should just say fight back. Well, that could be a million different things. But when it comes to fighting back, quote unquote, you can see the variety of Proud Boys and other groups that have shown up at a lot of these events and places, threatening people, wearing shirts that say, quote, kill all pedophiles with an AR-15 on it, and then baselessly calling, you know, drag queens pedophiles. You gotta wonder if there's a connection to those two things. I don't know, it really gets the noggin jogging. Really activates my almonds, that one. The fact that they will basically accuse anyone of being a pedophile and also think that all pedophiles should be killed. It's almost like, if you call anybody that, you're priming your audience, not necessarily Tucker Carlson in this case. So I don't know if he said that himself, but a lot of the people that are fans of him, you're priming everybody else to think like, oh, well, if they are all pedophiles, then it doesn't really matter what you do to them because they're the ultimate evil and you got to deal with them somehow, even though it's always lies, right? And again, no mention of circumcision. Yeah, well, that's because that's the child abuse that, people like Tucker Carlson are okay with. There's a lot of child abuse that people like Tucker Carlson are okay with, and in fact, very much outwardly praise. But, can't look at that too much. Now, apparently also, we've got Tucker going on an insane rant about a teacher with prosthetic breasts. So I've got some opinions on this one here, but let's see what we got here.
So this week, videos surfaced on the internet from a place called Trafalgar High School in Oakville, Ontario. That's right across the lake from Niagara Falls. These videos show a teacher called Stephen Hanna, who apparently has been employed at Trafalgar High for several years. Recently, Hanna decided to dress like a woman, or more precisely, as a grotesque caricature of a woman, not a real woman, but a kind of pneumatically inflated Marilyn Monroe look-alike. As part of his costume, Hanna strapped on a pair of gigantic prosthetic breasts, each the size of a 10-pound watermelon. We're not exaggerating here.
So I don't actually know if these are prosthetics or not, or if they're implants. I don't know if we've confirmed that at all, but, we'll keep going.
But here's the thing. Hanna isn't doing this in private, in his home, in restaurants and clubs. If he were, we would not be mentioning on the show because it would not be our business.
That's not even close. Are you insane? Imagine this teacher has, pictures they've taken, fully clothed, pictures they've taken looking like they do right now, but they don't look like this on the job. They look like that at home, but those pictures surface in public somehow. They would absolutely be attacking this person for doing it in the comfort of their own home. Now, I've got some takes on this, so we can keep watching it. But so if these are prosthetics, meaning that this is an article of clothing that they're wearing, I do think it's really fucking weird. All right, I'm just going to say that. I do think that's a bit inappropriate to have nipples protruding in the setting of a classroom, generally speaking. You just don't have the nipples be protruding, for one. And it makes it a little bit better, okay? For two, if they aren't prosthetic, wearable, well, then there's really not a whole lot you could do about it. So you just try to be as appropriate to the setting as possible with it, not have so much fucking nipple showing, wear a bra, maybe. It's a difficult situation. But I do find it to be really fucking weird, especially if they are prosthetics, meaning that you can choose whether or not you're going to wear them. There are a variety of different prostheses you could wear that would be significantly less obscene, I guess, inappropriate for the setting. It's just, there's something about the fact that nipple in society currently is sexualized, so it just makes it a little bit odd, right? That's the difficulty. If they're implants, it's a different story, because there's only so much you could do. Because there are women that are going to have bigger breasts naturally, even if they're not implants, right? So she's got to just be, trying to be a little bit more modest about it, because it's a school. I think people understand that, generally speaking, there are appropriate ways to dress at a school. So I will say that I don't think that, you shouldn't be dressing like this, if it is the case that it's an active choice to have these and they are prosthetics. And if they're not, you should be trying a little bit harder with the nipple situation. Because listen, there's some teachers out there with some big bazongas, and there's not really a whole lot you can do about that. So you do as much as you can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is that this is one teacher out of millions. And what they're trying to do here is they're trying to connect this person to literally every single teacher ever who are okay with the existence of trans and gay people, who allow their students to go by the pronouns that the students choose, that, call their students by the names they want to be called, which might contradict the name on their birth certificate or whatever. All of these teachers that are just being respectful of their students, they're trying to be oh, well, this caricaturized, I guess, person, that's what every single one of these so-called woke teachers is, and that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I think you can simultaneously say what I've said about the way this person is dressed and also hold that this is not the average teacher, right? But that's what they're trying to paint it as.
Stephen Hanna is doing it in class, in front of children. As the Canadian journalist Jonathan Kay put it, Hanna has been dressing like this for a while, but only recently have students within the school gone public with this fact. So they've been enduring this for a while. Kay also notes that Hanna's costume is based on a style of Japanese internet pornography, which translates roughly into English as exploding milk porn. So what's going on here? Well, you know exactly.
Exploding milk porn. So what's going on here? Oh, shit. I feel like we could just be yeah, this person should be dressing a bit more modestly without having to go here. I don't know, man. I feel like this kind of just cheapens the point. What are you talking about, man? You got something to tell us, Tucker Carlson? You got something you want to say to the class? You got something you want to share?
What is this about? It's about sex. Stephen Hanna is enlisting other people's children in his sexual fantasies.
I don't know if you could ever actually prove that, unless that's what this person has said. So to say it so definitively is a bit absurd. It's just incredibly easy to say what I've said about it and move on, frankly. I don't know if I'm controversial when it comes to the fact that I think that this is not good. Like, that I think that you should be dressing a little bit better, a little bit more modestly if you're a teacher. All right. I think that's just, like, dress codes are a thing for a reason. I think that's fair. Now, this is not to draw any similarities to other examples of people getting too upset about curvier women who happen to be teachers, being like, oh my God, I can't believe that she's dressing like that. And she's literally just wearing what a teacher would normally be wearing, but she happens to have more curves. Usually this is said by, like, the mothers of children who are upset because their husbands were eyeballing the teacher or whatever, you know, that kind of shit. It's not to draw any comparisons to that, because people have the bodies that they have, right? It is what it is. You do as much as you can to be as modest as you can. And you just don't got to be having nipples out. I think that's a fine barrier in the context of a class. Just don't be having nipples out, all right? They look like what conservative thinks the average trans person looks like. Well, yeah, this is like the fetishized version that conservatives jack off to of trans people. That is true. Anyway, so in this previous video, before that last one, I don't even know why the fuck I looked at that one, to be honest with you. It is, like, such a dumb story, and it's so easy to resolve. I guess we have to look at it in conjunction with this one, because they are related, unfortunately. But, like, this is the major one that we should be worrying about, where he literally, you know, tells people that, oh, they should fight back because all of these schools are evil, or blah, 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 blah. So I'm recording this on another day of the video that you are watching right now because it just keeps getting worse. And also I forgot some things. So for some background here, Matt Walsh recently did a big schizo post on Twitter about the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, blah, blah, blah. This is some stupid bullshit. Don't worry about it. You can find it. The claims he made after his investigation do not hold very much water, and nobody should have to care about it. But anyway. We've already gone over a lot of that shit in this video already. Now we have Tucker Carlson with the Chiron saying, we will show you who is responsible for this. Essentially just naming the people who are on the board of the directors at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center.
In the hope that these people will do something to stop these crimes before the lives of more children are destroyed.
So once again, the alleged crimes are actually not happening. The crimes that he is alleging are completely made up by the right wing in order to gain money and power and votes. And that's literally it. So now we're going to put on blast all the people on the board of directors here to meet that end for Tucker Carlson for money and power. And, you know, whatever happens, happens, I guess.
So the board members would include Edith Carroll Johnson, John F. Stein, Jeffrey R. Balzer, Lucinda M. Baer, Daniel Diermeyer, Sarah J. Finley, John R. Ingram, Michael M. E. Johns, Samuel E. Lynch, Alexander C. Taylor, and Makiba Williams.
So we're doing this, which certainly isn't anything to worry about, you know, just naming the board of directors for a medical center because you believe they have committed some crimes which are completely fabricated. And after this happened, Alejandra Caraballo shows that on 4chan, the hacker known as 4chan has decided to make some posts about it. They got very excited, so content warning for absolute fucking deranged lunacy. We've got some people here, quote, the doctors that perform these surgeries should have their families slaughtered while they're forced to watch. Not that I condone that type of thing, but it would send a hell of a message. Not that I condone that kind of a thing. I'm just going to say it should happen, like literal brain disease. Kill every one of these degenerates that dare harm children. And we've got an anime picture attached with the biggest tits you've ever seen. Your average anime fan, how can you call somebody a degenerate when you are consuming hentai? Like, I'm just saying, I'm not saying there's something wrong with consuming hentai. I guess it depends on what you're looking at. But I'm just saying, like, you can't claim to not be a degenerate, but then also look at hentai. Because if you're looking at hentai, you are inherently a degenerate. It is what it is. I fucking hate these vermin and their progressive supporters. 40 years ago, our parents and grandparents would have been riding in the streets and stringing these doctors and their supporters up on trees and light poles. It's just the greatest and best minds. From former Lurker 92, the pendulum is swinging. Not the only thing that should be swinging at the end of ropes. The only thing that should be swanging. Never mind, I can't say this in the context of what we're talking about. It was going to be a dick joke, but it's in poor taste. Anyway, so that's interesting.
Turn it up!
These people are absolutely insane. This incendiary rhetoric is 100% going to end badly.
So, completely expectedly, after we're going to name all of these people for crimes that you are alleging that have been fabricated and aren't actually happening, all of the worst people on the internet are really excited about it. They go on to say, a user on the Donald wants to do Nazi-style book burning, and goes on to, well, you already know if you watched the stream. In 1933, the first Nazi book burning started at Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexuality. A trans woman was murdered by the Nazis as they stormed the institute to pull books to burn. True. Surround the college and peacefully protest by burning all the medical books that have anything to do with gender. Book burnings, they send a very clear message. So, like, you don't like the medical and scientific information that we have derived. Like, they're anti-empiricism, they're anti-facts, they're anti-knowledge, they're anti-intellectual, they've got diseased brains, and under my proposed system, where mental health care is taken more seriously as also physical health care would be, these people would be able to get the mental help that they need, but unfortunately, because of the creation of the world that they prefer, a super hyper-capitalistic one where healthcare is commodified, well, here we have this. Now we can, for once, actually be compared to Nazis. Everybody hates it here, but the optics are a thing, and this is one of the bad ones. It has a lot to do with how brainwashed people are about Nazis in the first place. What do you mean brainwashed about the Nazis, dude? Are you saying that history has not remembered the Nazis well? Frankly, I feel like history has remembered the Nazis too well. In that we don't really talk about how the Nazis also rounded up and killed queer people as much, right? We don't talk about that. We also don't talk about how when the camps were liberated, the queer people that were there were not treated very well by the liberation forces because it was also seen to be bad to be queer in the States, for instance. We don't talk about that either. But anyway, same people that lie to you now are the same people that lied back then. Fuck optics. We do what is right no matter what the media will say. The media can suck it. We will come for them eventually. I think he forgot his echoes here, though. Even those not calling for murder or calling for the mass arrest of doctors, administrators, insurance executives involved with gender-affirming care, as well as activists and allies. So essentially, like, they can't win through legislation. They are making some gains in legislation, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the capacity to actually do the full ban yet. So what they're going to do instead of going through the legislative system is they're going to try to threaten hospitals, medical institutions, etc., and through either threats of violence or actual violence, force the hospitals to stop doing these procedures that are the standards of care, as you have seen or will see later when it comes to the WPATH standards of care for transgender healthcare. Going to try to stop them from doing that because these people think trans people are icky or something. There's really no actual good justification because the things they claim to be big problems, like, oh my God, what about the children? What about the children? Are not really happening. You know, there could be some cases here and there, and those are problems that you want to look at. But the way you fix that is not by banning it, but by regulating it better, and also not having our health insurance system and our healthcare system generally be a fucking hodgepodge, a patchwork of a variety of different corporations that our commodified healthcare system, you know, forces people to interface with, and to nationalize it so that you have more oversight and can be more standardized across the board. 4chan users were absolutely giddy when they saw that Tucker Carlson named the Vanderbilt board members because they wanted him to quote-unquote name the Jews. Content warning, anti-Semitism. No way. From the right wing, you're telling me they're gonna be anti-Semitic? What? He named the Jews. He's naming them, and we're going to name them. Yeah, and they've all got anime profile pictures. These people all probably enjoy the idea of underaged anime characters and a variety of art that they consume about those characters, but don't look into that too deeply about the projection that might be involved there. Dan didn't expect this night to be a rage episode. Name them. John F. Stein, oy vey. Fuck. Okay, this person thinks Tucker Carlson is part of the Jewish cabal. That's interesting. And then we've got racism here. Very, very, like, you know, the right is getting better at comedy and the left is getting nervous. We already know this. The naming of board members was intentionally done by Tucker to incite death threats against them to get them to close the clinic. Users on extremist sites are obliging. The use of stochastic terror to close down gender-affirming care clinics is on full display. I need not remind you in previous videos that we talked about, Dr. George Tiller was literally killed, assassinated, because it was a politically motivated thing, because Bill O'Reilly called him Tiller the Baby Killer, I think more than 40 times on his program, and at the time, Bill O'Reilly had one of the most popular news shows on TV. So somebody, and he was an abortion provider, just following standards of care once again, but for abortions. And then they fucking killed him after that. So we've already seen history has precedents for how this kind of stochastic terrorism can actually lead to real-world violence and harm through a myriad of different lenses, not just from that specific story or even the one we're talking about right now with the bomb threat on Boston Children's Hospital. We've got a lot of history to go off of here. But of course, you know, the landscape in the modern day is a little bit different with the internet. So We've also talked about this in previous videos as well, but I mean, what will we be doing if we're going to talk about conservatives and not talk about their hypocrisy? I mean, you kind of have to, because to be a conservative necessitates that you are hypocritical. You have a variety of contradictions in your worldview, and the things that you propose people should do, and then the things you do as well. It's just kind of part and parcel to being a conservative, being on the right, because they don't care about anything but power. So, you know, law for thee, but not for me, blah, 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 blah. You got, from the Terfs TV, friend of the show, Tucker Carlson defends a teacher giving a lap dance to a 15-year-old kid. So let's, listen to this. Content warning, your average conservative's views about children and sexual activity.
A lap dance in front of the entire class. Alicia Smith, pictured on the screen, accused of grinding on the 15-year-old, putting her head between his legs and fondling him. Smith reportedly admits to doing all this, but only after the rest of the class, she says, convinced her to.
Okay.
So, I think legitimate opinion divides whether this was appropriate for the classroom or not.
These are the people that get mad about all ages drag shows where the people are literally wearing more clothes than your average teacher would be, right? These are the people very, very, very scared of an all ages drag show or drag story time.
But there are people, hold on, so let me finish. There are people out there who believe that there ought to be criminal sanctions brought against this woman. And I think that's deranged.
So if the class had
because there's no victim here.
If the class had tried to convict her or convince her of...
So this is the classic, right? Where there'll be a story of child sexual abuse. And because it's a child who happens to be a boy and not a girl, and then the person who did the child sexual assault was a woman, well, then you go, oh, where was she when I was growing up? Like, if I was in his shoes, and these dudes are like 45, 50, 60, 70. If I was in his shoes, that's a W, brother. There's no victim here. It's like, so like apparently to the conservative, they think, oh, child abuse is okay as long as it's a boy and it's a woman doing it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? You've lost your mind. But this is very, very, very common on the right. The right only claims to care about the safety of children, the sanctity, the innocence of children, even though the average person who does child sexual abuse is usually a white religious man who is related to the victim. Look at all the states that still allow for child marriage, and the rates of those child marriages in these states. The grand majority happen to be Republican, solid red states.
Committing a crime like killing somebody, which you've done it too.
But this isn't a crime. That's the point I'm making. A crime suggests a victim, and
what do you
no
mean
one
there's no
here
victim,
is
though? There's a 15-year-old kid, and then you have a grown-up teacher.
There's a 15-year-old boy.
15
so
So that's supposed to be a correction. So she says 15-year-old kid, and he corrects her with boy. Woman is adult human female, by the way. You would imagine that, not a woman then would be a girl because they're younger and not adult, right? So man and then boy is the assumption that I think these people would talk about a lot, considering their very rigid understanding of gender and biological sex.
Having been a 15-year-old boy, I can tell you, unless there's something we don't know about this kid's life has not been
I have taught 15-year-old boys. I assure you they are still kids.
This is the
they may be
dream of
laughing, but I assure you...
I mean...
Yes, are you insane? It's literally Tucker Carlson in this clip has stated, what is going on? Child sexual abuse is okay as long as it's a boy and the perpetrator's a woman. That's what he's saying. I don't know why I kind of sound like Hank Hill there. I can't really do a Tucker Carlson impression. Anyway, we've also gone over this on the stream before. Tucker Carlson presents his attacks on LGBTQ people as motivated by concern for sexualizing children. But here he is claiming charges against Warren Jeffs were quote-unquote bullshit. Jeffs was later convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl and a 15-year-old girl. Just playing defense for child abusers and sexual assaulters. But, they had Bill O'Reilly on their program who was assaulting, to be fair to him, the adult women, the adult females at Fox News and the variety of other Fox workers who have gotten in trouble for harassment. Just par for the course for Fox News. And the male anchors there.
Warren Jeffs didn't marry underage girls.
No, he's in prison for facilitation of child rape.
Whatever the hell that means.
That means
he's in prison. He's in prison because he's weird and unpopular, and he has a different lifestyle that other people find creepy.
A different lifestyle that other people find creepy. The dude who was convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl and a 15-year-old girl. Just a lifestyle choice.
He's an accessory to the rape of children. That is a felony, and a serious one at that.
Also, I'm pretty sure this is on the Bubba the Love Sponge program, and I'm pretty sure Bubba the Love Sponge is also, like, fucking insane right-winger. So the idea that Tucker is getting pushback from that guy on this is ridiculous. Imagine.
What do you mean an accessory? He's, like, got some weird religious cult where he thinks it's okay to, marry underage girls. But he didn't do it. Why wouldn't the guy who actually did it, who had sex with an underage girl, he should be the one who's doing life?
Well, turns out he did it.
The rapist in this case has made a lifelong commitment to live and take care of the person. So it is a little different. I mean,
so it's a little different if you're going to continue to abuse this person in perpetuity because you've decided to get married to them when they can't consent to that either.
He's not accused of touching anybody. He is accused of facilitating a marriage between a 16-year-old girl and a 27-year-old man. That's the accusation. That's
even the language he's using. 16-year-old girl, 27-year-old man. Like, he knows it's wrong, inherently. If the language that conservatives use is so rigid and the definitions matter so much, then he's literally saying, what the problem is here.
What they're calling felony rape.
But in our state,
that's bullshit. I'm sorry. Now, this guy may be a total creep. Maybe it's not rapist. I'm just telling you that arranging a marriage between a 16-year-old and a 27-year-old is not the same as pulling a stranger off the street and raping her. That's bullshit.
But they're still both wrong. I think most reasonable people would say, right? Still both wrong. Classic. Anyway, imagine my shock. Tucker Carlson, a danger to children? No way. Who could have expected this? A Fox News host, danger to children? Wow. Anyway, back to the video, I suppose. The standard stochastic terrorism that they've been up to. We've got libs of TikTok now targeting Akron Children's Hospital after the Boston Children's Hospital was subject to bomb threats. The FBI has arrested a woman for those bomb threats, which interrupted service for luckily only 40 minutes at Boston Children's Hospital. So it's just never ending. Conservatives' attacks on children are never ending. And for some looks into the future, well, we got Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, literally one of the dumbest motherfuckers out there in the Republican Party. So Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, introduced a national bill that would forcibly out transgender students if they want to go by a different name, pronouns, use the bathroom, etc. This would apply to all public schools, so this is a national thing. It will not pass, but they are signaling intent for 2024. They would absolutely do this if they had the power to do so. There's no reason why they wouldn't. There's nothing that's going to stop them. If they're going to try to, like Lindsey Graham, who recently introduced a bill to restrict abortion access to women federally across the country, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that they go for something like this, right? So essentially, the playbook, as it has always been, is that right-wingers are weaponizing the humanity of trans people for electoral gain, for monetary gain, for the gain of power. That's factual information. Ron DeSantis has done this. Greg Abbott in Texas has done this. All of these Republicans, a core part of their platform of what they talk about now is, oh my God, they think men can be women. They're trying to like trans your kids or whatever. That's one of the major campaign pushes for the right wing. And this is the kind of stuff that they're going to be trying to do if they get that power. And it'll continue to extend out to all other oppressed people until they eventually claw back all the way to the white supremacist patriarchal state that they once had, right? So all of this is happening at the same time that the WPATH Standards of Care 8 have come out in the International Journal of Transgender Health. So these are medical doctors who put out the standards of care for trans healthcare. These will be used not just by doctors, but by lawyers in courts. TERFs tried to infiltrate but failed. Notes: 1 letter required, down from 2 for surgeries. Explicit allowance of informed consent. No, quote, watchful waiting conversion therapy. The recommendation for hormone therapy has been lowered to 14 years of age. Also, the call out to, quote unquote, rapid onset gender dysphoria is not in this version of WPATH. As far as I can tell, a number of TERF adjacent doctors wanted to insert it in there. Didn't happen. There's new longitudinal studies in the new WPATH standards of care, so that'll help a lot of court cases. For adults, a 1-year waiting period for surgeries has been lowered to 6 months. This indication is also removed for non-binary patients who decline HRT. So, like, the idea that, oh, people are immediately, like, chopping their dick off as soon as, like, oh my God, I think I might be a girl or whatever. It's just not happening. There is a lot of waiting periods for adults to get surgeries and sometimes even to be able to get HRT hormones, right? The idea that it's so easy to get trans healthcare is foolish. So these are the standards of care. This is like what the actual medical society, the experts in the field who have done the research, who have looked at the studies, have come to the conclusion on. That trans healthcare is real healthcare. That trans people exist and deserve the healthcare to the same capacity that everybody else has for whatever it is that they need. But all of the people on the right are going to contradict this scientific and medical consensus because they're all dumb as fuck. Because they all have an agenda, because all they want to make money and they want to get elected. That's it. So to end on a better note, in Ohio, there was a policy that would try to ban trans students using their preferred pronouns, out them and ban them from bathrooms. We got Dawn Riggs, a teacher who testified against this policy. Content warning, retelling of events pertaining to suicide, self-harm, abuse, etc., etc. Let's take a listen.
My name is Dawn Riggs. I'm from Logan, Ohio, and I am an educator in my 33rd year of teaching.
33 years.
I'm here to oppose the harmful resolution
Veteran.
presented by Member Shea. I am certified in theater and in science, so my experience on this issue is multifaceted. As a teacher, I have had the privilege of working with many LGBTQ+ students in my career. Specific to transgender youth, I have many trans and non-binary students in my classes. My experience with transgender individuals spans my entire career. I am still in touch with some of those folks.
So for 33 years, she has had students who are non-binary and or trans. But oh, it's this new fad. It's this new trend that everybody's following. You know, trans people were invented yesterday. Come on.
Single former student has told me how much knowing they had a safe place to be their authentic selves has meant to them. They have shared stories about traumas they were experiencing outside my classroom, from classmates, other teachers, family members. They have told me about their cutting. They have told me about their suicidal thoughts, their depression and anxiety and wish to disappear. The fact that they could walk into my classroom, be called the name they chose, and be called by the pronouns that reflected their lived experience made a difference.
And that's what right-wingers want to get rid of, right? By forcefully outing trans kids to their parents in class, where the classroom, in this case at least, is like one of the safest spaces that these kids actually have, usually like an oasis, away from the abuse that they face from their parents who are homophobic, transphobic, whatever it is. They want to forcibly out these kids so that those kids continue to get abused by their bigoted parents to hopefully, in their minds, stop them from being gay, trans, whatever it is. That's what the right-wingers want. They want to ban people from using whatever bathroom they feel comfortable using to further that kind of othering, that kind of oppression. They want to ban classrooms from using the preferred pronouns and names for these students to further the abuse from the home to the classroom, when the classroom is usually the only place that people can go to be themselves with their friends. They want to take even that away from the youth who are already suffering under abusive conditions in the home. The reason why a lot of these kids will confide in their teachers when it comes to their identity, being trans, non-binary, wanting to use another name, other pronouns, is because they know that that is a person of authority that will actually take them seriously. They trust their teachers more than they trust their own parents. If you are a parent and your child trusts the people that give them homework more than the people that gave them life, that is a you problem. That is your issue, and you have to do some soul searching, some introspection to find out why you are such a failure of a parent that your child trusts their teachers with telling them who they are than you, their parent. That's your problem. It's not the kid's problem. That's not the teacher's problem. That's your problem. That's your failure as a parent.
It is no burden to use a name that we are asked to use. It is no burden to use the pronouns that are shared with us.
True.
If your friend William asks you to call him Billy, you don't blink an eye. If your friend Elizabeth says, I go by Lily, you call her Lily, and we just say okay. The only difference between these examples and those opposed by this harmful resolution is the perception that a student's gender does not fit your expectation of it.
True.
The damage done by that policy is unthinkable, and I will not discriminate against my students. And this Board of Education must not either.
And that's the thing, too, is that there are a lot of teachers out there who are respectful, empathetic, like normal people, willing to be kind to others for the sake of being kind to them. There are so many of these teachers out there, and these resolutions that are being proposed in schools are literally trying to force teachers like this to discriminate against their students, to forcibly put their students in harm's way by outing them to their abusive parents. There is a reason why these kids hide that information from their parents. Kids are not as stupid as conservatives think they are. Kids can pick up on the idea that their parents might be homophobic, transphobic by the things that those parents say about other trans or queer people, or the media that they consume, like the news that they consume, and understand that they, as trans people or whatever, are not going to be safe if that information about their identity is found out by their parents. So they stay closeted until they go somewhere else, like school, where they can be more open about it. So the idea that you would then force teachers to put their students in harm's way like that is ridiculous. It's ludicrous. You would never expect this for anything else. But for some reason, it's okay when it's about trans people.
Our students must be able to choose the time and the manner in which they share their transness and with whom. It is not our place to force them to do so. I urge you to oppose this hateful and misguided rhetoric. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Very, very good. Dawn Riggs, teacher of the century, some say. By the way, at this Ohio Board of Education meeting for the testimony, the overflow room, the place people go because when there's too many people in the standard waiting area, is also overflowing with people who are trying to testify against the resolution that would force teachers to discriminate against their students. Is a very large amount of people that have given testimony like this against the harmful resolution. Aaron Reed says almost all 60+ speakers were against the policy. So here we have an interesting story, and I wanted to end on this as well, about why it is that conservatives want to stop trans people from being able to be who they are in public. They want to stop trans people, 1, from existing, 2, from being visible, and 3, from being happy and prosperous. The reason for this is because out of sight, out of mind is better for them, because once people are exposed more and more to people who just live different lives than others, the fact that trans people exist, they're just normal human beings like everybody else, they start to become more and more accepting of those people. There's a reason why big population centers like cities tend to be more inclusive and accepting of different people, be it different race, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, whatever, sexuality, whatever it is. They tend to be more diverse and therefore more accepting because these places have so many different people in it. You interact with so many people of so many different walks of life, and you start to understand that those people are just normal people like everybody else, going to a coffee shop to grab a coffee on the way to work, driving Uber, the people who collect your garbage every day, bring your groceries up at the grocery store. They're all just normal people. Like you or me, just vibing, doing their goddamn shit as a human being. They don't want people to have that experience because they don't want people to be accepting of them because they don't want those people to exist. And it's interesting that, you know, as a Joel Tungus on Twitter, who follows me, has posted, it's cool how transphobia just starts to dissolve when you spend time with us, shockingly, right? So this is in Gender Critical. If this is on Over It, I think it might be. I don't know the UI, but it looks like what we were looking at before. It's in Gender Critical, though, so... And their username is adult human female, which is a great sign. They say, quote, "So I'm an alcoholic. I started attending AA meetings in person recently, and I absolutely love one that is all women in my age range, and they do not recite Christian prayer. Hell yeah. Last week, though, I experienced the typical surprise in this era of, oh, that's a man, quote unquote. I have to say he passed very well, obviously transitioned a long time ago and tries to live stealth. I classified him as a homosexual transsexual and as a man who had naturally been very feminine prior to transitioning. The obvious sign of one of the healthiest minds possible, right? Who looks at another person and has these thoughts like, oh, that's a homosexual, transsexual. They were probably very feminine prior to transitioning. He's got something going on. You gotta look into that. You're going to AA and good for you. Hell yeah. Get over that alcohol addiction. But you should also be going to therapy for whatever the fuck this is, because this is also unhealthy. It was his hands, feet, brow ridge height that gave it away. He had a deep voice for a woman. There are very many women who have deep voices, but so do I, and there you go. And his voice wasn't any deeper than mine. Then why bring it up? What the fuck? You're posting your own L's. You saying you got a manly voice? Yikes. Adult human female, by the way. Here's where I'm conflicted. He didn't behave in a male way. What does that even mean? Or hog the floor. I absolutely identify with everything he said. His mannerisms, his manner of speech was very female. If I hadn't seen him in person, I would not have known. Well, isn't that just the funniest thing, huh? I felt compassion for him, not anger that he was intruding upon a woman's space, and I thought, quote, would it really hurt me to be kind and go along with it just for his sake? So, parsing the words here, go along with his delusion for his sake, right? Would it, though? So it's not a delusion for 1 and 2. Would it hurt you? No, it doesn't actually. It hasn't ever. There's never been a case where this has hurt you in any meaningful capacity. It's not happened. You've only been told stories of it happening by people who have been lying about it. The infinitesimally small cases where a trans person was a shitty person just like anybody else can be is not enough, fortunately. I found out that the meeting that he's been in that group for 5 years, whereas I just recently started attending it, but he had been absent for a number of weeks prior. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to go along with it. I'm going to pretend he's a woman, and I'm going to go back to that meeting. However, if you were AGP, so an autogynephile, which is a debunked idea about how, all trans women are so-called, just men who fetishize women and like to see themselves as women because they get sexual thrill from the idea of seeing themselves as it's bullshit. It's been debunked time and time again, and it's essentially just used as a derogatory term now, usually by gender criticals, TERFs, these anti-trans conservatives. However, if you were an AGP or seemed mentally unstable, I had not returned, but I honestly didn't mind him being there. They go on to say he didn't care about women talking about being a mother. He didn't announce his pronouns. It's almost like trans people are usually trying to live as the gender that they identify as, and usually will use a variety of signifiers to have people hopefully assume the gender identity that they are. So in the case of a trans woman, usually they will dress like society expects a woman to dress. And then to announce your pronouns, well, you would just hope that somebody would assume she, her, and then you'd kind of blend into society as you expect most trans people are trying to do that. I also can't imagine that the humility aspect of AA would have appealed to him and that he'd been able to do his steps. Also, misgendering this person the entire time. For what? Really? Like, what do you gain from doing this? He was not woke. He was dressed professionally like a professional woman in her 40s and had obviously come right from work. I know transsexuals like him are rare, are the minority among TIM, so trans-identified males, which is another absurdist term that people in the gender critical sphere use in a derogatory sense. They say, I wouldn't want him playing women's sports or winning an award designated for a woman or getting a grant or loan earmarked for women. If he committed a crime, I would want his crime recorded as a male crime. Okay. But my first instinct would be to hesitate in putting him in a male jail, even though that's literally what they are always advocating for. They're always using bunk studies about the prevalence of trans women committing assault or rape in women's prisons, while conveniently ignoring the myriad of actual evidence of trans women who are put in male prisons being the ones being assaulted by the men in those prisons. Conveniently ignoring that. But because this one passes enough, well, there you go. Because you could identify with this person enough, well, then they're worthy of moral consideration and are actually human instead of subhuman like you thought previously. Wow, thank God. We've taken our baby steps, I guess. Maybe it's because I've been to jail and have thus lost much of my sense of privacy, but I know could use the toilet in front of him, but I wouldn't want to have him as a cellie. Yet I'd socialize with him in a common area in jail depending on what he was in for. Like, it's so absurd. Like, what are we talking about here? Until now, all the trans women I've known and encountered have been AGPs, your assessment, of course, and meeting him has really given me a lot to think about, especially about how my female socialization screamed, just be kind at me. Though, gender criticals conveniently decide not to be kind at all other times unless a trans woman passes sufficiently, right? So, shocking. Actually interacting with trans people and understanding that they're just humans like you and me is a good way to actually see them as that and then no longer be as bigoted against them. It's almost like if you're only ever hearing these fictionalized stories on boards like Over It, you're going to get a warped perception of what trans people are. If you're only watching Tucker Carlson and you're being led to believe that this person is what all trans people look like, well, then that's going to be your impression. But if you actually see trans people just living their lives like normal people, well, then suddenly all of that breaks away because you recognize that you've been lied to, at least in the small way that this person has. They're not fully there yet, but it's baby steps. We're getting there a little bit, right? It's the same thing for how so many people who have been homophobic in the past, once they have family members that come out as gay, those homophobic people end up becoming less homophobic because they have a family member, somebody that they see as a normal human like everybody else, that just happens to be gay and they're aware of that now. Suddenly they become less and less homophobic. This is why, once again, conservatives want to ban trans people from using the bathroom that they're most comfortable with. Like, so if we look at this person's description of this trans woman in this AA meeting, then apparently they pass as a woman so much that they would hesitate to put them in a male prison. So would you also then hesitate to force that person to use the men's restroom? Probably not, because that person going into the men's restroom is like if a cis woman was to go into the men's restroom. You would imagine that would put that woman in harm's way, potentially. It's the same for the trans woman, but that's what conservatives want. They want to erase trans and queer people from broader society so that the lies that they tell about them, the fictionalized versions that they make up about them, become what everybody associates with trans people, which then allows them to justify the oppression they want to do against them, the dehumanization that they want to do against them. It's what leads to the justification that people like Helen Joyce would use in her genocidal attempts to remove trans people from broader society. Out of sight, out of mind, if the only thing you know about trans people is the bullshit lies you've been told to about them on the internet by people like Helen Joyce, by people like Tucker Carlson, well, then you're going to be okay with Helen Joyce essentially copying the homework of the Nazis when it came to people with disability, but for trans people instead. Right? That's the point. That's why they do this. And that's why they don't like positive representation of trans people in media, positive representation of queer people in media, positive representation of black and brown people in media, because it becomes harder to dehumanize those people and justify the oppression against them. Simple as. Also, Starbucks in Albany, New York, voted to unionize 31st Starbucks in New York. Over 250 plus unionized Starbucks. Hell yeah, let's go. Always got to add it in there. Always got to add the union news in there. I don't know where else to go with this segment. I think we got a good logical endpoint. Be kind to one another. Trans and queer people. People like everybody else. Black and brown people. Just people like everybody else. Living their lives. All people can be shitty. So if these individual people end up being shitty, so do, cis white people. It is what it is. We take it one day at a time. Be well. This video is Connor Collins, friend of the show, fellow streamer, and critical racing theorist, Beer Bash Johnson. Thanks so much for the support, for hanging out, for the raids, for vibing. Really appreciate that. If you'd like to be the next Connor Collins, all you gotta do is follow me on Twitter, @ConnorCC. Retweet my video links when they go live. Remember to subscribe to the channel, all notifications on. Hit the bell when you do that, or something. Leave a like, comment something down below about how it's an absolute shock that Tucker Carlson is able to operate in the same way that he's been allowed to operate, and the idea that in a civilized society, Fox News, generally speaking, would be continued to operate in the capacity that they do, even though they've led to untold human suffering and don't even accurately report on the news. And have a good day.